What's good, wrestling fans? You're watching the Two Bros Wrestling Show. It's Kevin. Sending all my love to my normal co host, Doug, who isn't with us this week. Hopefully, we have Doug back with us next week. But we wanted to push ahead with the show because tonight, in our main event, we are giving our hot takes on TNA Thursday Night Impact. It has been a big week for TNA as they return to the major leagues of cable anyway. And how did we think they did? How do you think they did? So I'm going to break it down when we get to the main event here in a few moments. I want to hear from you. We're going to review the matches, the faces, those that you recognize, just how we feel that they did overall. I know that many of you were watching and many of you may not tune back in again. We will see what our verdict is in a few moments. But before we do that, as always, we begin every show with our opening bell. So let's hit it. Since it is TNA that is our main event topic this week, let's start with a TNA story. Even though it was a big accomplishment that they had their debut on AMC, it wasn't all good news for TNA this week. In fact, a bad news as far as losing talent right before you have your big new media rights deal start. The Rascals have left TNA and have signed an agreement with AEW. So Myron Reed, Desmond Xavier, Zachary Wentz, and Trey Miguel are all set to debut with AEW very soon. You probably saw, if you watched Dynamite this past week, you saw the graphic saying that the Rascals were coming. It's a big loss on the cusp of TNA leveling up, as the Rascals are a very innovative, relatively young team that does an exciting style of tag team wrestling, would make a good impression on a lot of individuals who maybe aren't familiar with the Rascals had they tuned in to TNA and saw them wrestle. You may, though, if you're a hardcore WWE fan and watch the NXT brand, you're at the very least familiar with Xavier and Wentz because they previously were in TNA under the names Wes Lee and Nash Carter. But just as TNA lost talent to AEW is reportedly losing talent to the biggest of fish, that being WWE. The rumors are rampant that Powerhouse Hobbs is done with AEW and is expected to sign with WWE, who have interest in him, as soon as it is legally possible for him to do so. His contract with AEW ended this week, and part of what helped fuel the rumors that he was not re-signing and was quick to go is that the Collision tapings, which occurred earlier in the week but didn't air till last night, included Powerhouse and his teammates in the Ops dropping the trios titles to Jet Speed and Hangman Page. No spoilers here since this is airing after Collision, but because they were obviously getting the title off Hobbs in a hurry, that furthered the speculation that he was in fact on his way out and going to WWE. Once that is made official, obviously we will follow up with a report here on the Two Bros Wrestling Show. I think that there's a lot of upside to Powerhouse Hobbs. I think in the WWE environment that he probably will excel in a way that maybe he could not in AEW. I believe that WWE knows a little more what to do with physiques and body types, personalities closer to what Hobbs is, and then much the way that we've seen a Jade Cargill, for example, blossom under the WWE machine. I would be fully expectant that someone still relatively green in the business like Powerhouse Hobbs should expect a very similar evolution once the coaches at the Performance Center get a hold of him and unlock his full potential. One more contract news story for you. It was revealed this week that CMLL stars Mascara Dorada, Persephone, and Hechicero are now under dual contracts to CMLL and All Elite Wrestling. They have all appeared, obviously, on AEW and Ring of Honor television, but it's more now knowing that there are these dual contract situations that allow additional money to be guaranteed to these individuals. And it's just interesting information, especially in light of the fact that CMLL's largest competition, AAA, down in Mexico, they're owned outright by WWE. So it is good to know for the future of the partnership that CMLL talents can have dual contracts where they are paid both by CMLL as well as Tony Khan's organizations and get additional exposure as well. Speaking of Ring of Honor is teaming up with Maple Leaf Wrestling for a March 27th Global Wars show. There is a second uprising night to that partnership as well. So this is now a 2-day international wrestling weekend with cooperations between the two companies. And then finally, bringing our opening bell to a close, if you can't catch Royal Rumble live using your ESPN subscription, and or if you're international, your Netflix subscription, you have another way of watching Royal Rumble. And no, that's not live and in person, because I imagine most of you watching this are probably not going to fly to Saudi Arabia. But if you want to see it live in theaters, you are getting that opportunity thanks to a partnership between WWE and Fandango, the online movie ticketing service, not the wrestler who just retired this weekend. More on him in a moment. But Fandango and WWE are bringing Royal Rumble this year to select theaters on Saturday the 31st. That broadcast, because it is coming from Saudi Arabia, will begin at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific. Tickets are now on sale, so you may want to do a Google search, check out the Fandango website, and see if one of your local theaters is going to be airing Royal Rumble, and you have an opportunity to see it on the big screen. And with that, our opening bell comes to a close. Let's move right to our main event, and that is TNA's Thursday Night Impact debut on AMC. Did they absolutely kill it? Did they absolutely blow it? No. It is somewhere in the middle, which is probably to be expected. But there is a lot to unpack, so let's just run through the format of the show, what we saw, who you as a casual fan may remember, and maybe under a different guise and a different name, of course. For myself, it was my first I shouldn't say it's my first viewing in 10 years. I have caught the occasional show. I've always followed the product. I watch clips, so I probably, more than the casual viewer, know what is going on in TNA, even if I do not watch on a regular basis. Thursday night was a very important show, as it begins me watching TNA on a regular basis, which I imagine for a lot of fans is also the same boat that you find yourself in. I'm going to watch no matter what. Many of you, probably if you're watching this, you're more than a casual wrestling fan, so there's a very good chance that you are going to be watching no matter what, at least for a while. But for that casual fan, that AEW, WWE fan who maybe have never even seen the TNA before in its prior time on like Spike TV, when it maybe was in its golden age, I would say that is pretty arguably the truth. Maybe this is your first viewing of TNA. Those fans are the ones that are going to ultimately decide whether or not this is a successful relationship that will continue beyond what is currently contracted. So what did those individuals think? If it was your first time watching TNA, please comment as we go along here and let us know what you thought. But as for the show itself, we start out pretty strong. We start out with AJ Styles on stage, making his return into a TNA ring. If you saw our show last week, I highly advise you go back and watch it. We were talking TNA. We were talking the history of TNA, the resilience of TNA, how they just absolutely refused to die despite many times being pronounced dead, and to persevere to get to this point. We also counted down the top stars in the history of TNA, the wrestlers whose legacy are primarily built on their work in TNA. Doug and I both chose AJ Styles as the number one legacy pick of a man who made his name on his time in TNA and that body of work. So is it appropriate? Absolutely. The first person that you see on your screen on AMC's Thursday Night Impact is the man most associated with the TNA brand. It is also a current WWE wrestler. So your casual fan who obviously knows AJ Styles as a big star is immediately brought into this new product going, this must be a big deal. AJ Styles is here talking about this being the house that he built. So I was 100% on board with the fact that they chose the first taste of Impact Wrestling to many wrestling fans being a visual of AJ Styles in the middle of a TNA ring. All of that, absolute right decision. What you can complain about is what AJ was there to do. He didn't wrestle. Maybe that has something to do with his preference. More likely, it's something to do with WWE's preference. They probably granted him permission to be there, probably did not want him to wrestle. But it is AJ's final year in the sport, so it would have been nice to have got a little more out of him. Maybe not expect him to wrestle, but maybe expect a promo that wasn't just some platitudes and was honestly just a whole lot shorter than I would have expected it to be. It wasn't the last, though, that we did see of AJ. I guess in fairness, you should, take note of the fact that throughout the show, he made a few other minor appearances in backstage segments, giving the rub to various TNA talents. But still, the opportunity to have AJ on your show was the right one. I don't know that they fully capitalized on it. The first person that we see outside of AJ Styles, who is an active TNA talent, is also a familiar face, and that is one of Elijah, who fans will remember as WWE's Elias. So those that remember Elias and his singing gimmick, his guitar gimmick, they probably, if you had an opinion strongly one way or the other on Elias, you either thought, oh, this is great, I know this man, or, oh, great, this is going to be WWE cast-offs. That really is dependent upon the individual. Immediately out after Elijah were someone I think that is easily more universally beloved by wrestling fans, and that are the Hardy Boys. And they were there to team up with Elijah in the first match of the TNA Thursday Night Impact era. It was a 6-man that included those three taking on Order 4. The Order 4 faction features Mustafa Ali, who WWE fans are also very familiar with. It was a swanton for a win by the Hardys and Elijah. There was really nothing much to this match. Maybe I would have gone with a more athletic contest, a longer contest for my first match ever on AMC. This is what TNA chose, and it was fine. Nothing earth-shattering, but I guess it was a lot of familiar names. At least 4 of these 6 participants should be familiar to former WWE viewers or casual wrestling fans in general. Maybe they don't remember Elias, now Elijah. If you haven't watched in a while, but I would imagine almost all fans of any generation at this point, if they don't know the Hardys, they're probably not wrestling fans. I think this was more really about building to the pay-per-view that they were having this weekend, which is something I'll get to in my final verdict of the show, is how much time was spent, as one would in a go-home show, promoting your pay-per-view. But the post-match angle had the juice here, and that is the Righteous coming out and attacking the Hardys, because that who was going to be the opponents of the Hardys this weekend at the pay-per-view. All of that is understandable, fine and good. The Righteous, many folks also will know, they are Ring of Honor talents, both the old school version as well as the more recent AEW reincarnation of Ring of Honor. They were there for a while as well. So the Righteous might have some name value to casual wrestling fans or AEW Ring of Honor viewers. The attacking of the Hardys was well done. The best part of it being the visual of the Righteous taking a chain and a padlock and taking Jeff Hardy's poor ear that he keeps very vulnerable thanks to his gauges that he has, and pretty much shackle him to the ropes by his ear as they beat down Matt. All of that was well done and really was the purpose of this segment more than the forgettable match that kind of came beforehand. From there, we go to a very cool video package, which summarized the history of the X Division. Now, WWE really doesn't put a huge focus any longer on their cruiserweights. So if you want to be a differentiator in the marketplace at this point in time, AEW doesn't have a cruiserweight division. Highlight your X Division. Show the history of the X Division. I thought that was very well done. It's a good way to show faces from the past that many fans might remember, as well as showing some of your current stars and the history of what is the X Division and how innovative it has been. They did something very similar later on in the night with the Knockouts division, and then yet again with the men's division. I totally thought that those three were great ways to introduce the divisions, both in the history of those divisions, the current faces of those divisions, and the importance of those divisions. It's really good to establish who TNA has been and who they are today and who the players are. So all of that is very well done. But as I mentioned, they're also promoting a pay-per-view. They're also promoting the fact that this is the biggest night in the history of TNA because of the AMC debut. So there really was a lot to get across. And at times it felt like they were really straining to get it all in. A whole lot of talking, even though these promo packages were well done. That's when, after the X Division, when they made a rather odd decision. I know you're on AMC, so start doing tie-ins with AMC. I'm fine with the Dark Winds actors being there. Great show. Actually, very excited it's coming back. But showing the Dark Winds actors probably didn't mean much to your audience that was tuning in to watch wrestling. From there, they also showed a lot of TNA wrestlers and legends who were sitting in the crowd. My main problem with the Dark Winds actors, as well as the wrestlers like Eric Young and folks who were at ringside, is they showed them on the hard side of the camera, where the camera was. When the show started, you saw a really hot, full-looking arena. But when they went to these promos, they made the weird decision to put the actors against the backdrop of the side of the arena that was very obviously empty. So you're looking at Eric Young or the Dark Winds actors, and other than a row or two of people directly behind them, you're seeing level upon level of completely empty seats, which is a terrible visual and something that could have very easily been avoided by just moving these folks over to the side that you were filming for most of the night that looked really, really good. Just not something that looked very major league, especially for what you want to be, your good first impression. Those who maybe remember TNA, the last they may have watched TNA may have been through some of the darker years when Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff were starting to drive the company into the ground, quite honestly. And if that version of TNA is why you stop following TNA, this kind of look probably didn't instill confidence in you that you were missing anything. Moving on, they went to another promo, and this one was from Santino Marella, which, again, a face that is familiar to wrestling fans who follow the product at any point over the last 15 years or so. Most folks have seen Santino during that time, or if you're a more recent fan and you watch NXT, you've seen him as part of the crossover that NXT does with TNA. So having Santino out is also something that gives people a familiar face, some connectivity to the product. Santino was there to introduce a new co-authority figure for him to work with, and that was the debuting Daria Ray, who WWE fans will remember as Sonya Deville. They played up the fact that she has general manager experience without mentioning that she's now working under a different name or that experience came on WWE SmackDown. But as Sonya, Daria did a great job, I thought, in WWE as an authority figure, as a spokesperson. She was good on the mic. She's also good in the ring. So let's see whether or not they choose to end up using her as an on-ring talent. But I'm all on board for using her in any fashion because I thought the WWE made a mistake by letting her go. So her debut is a big deal, and it does set up a foil for Santino's that you have dual power structure, one an obvious face, one an obvious heel. Those of you who maybe are tired of the authority figures in wrestling and that think that angle is played out, your mileage may vary on this decision, but I'm okay with it and to see where it goes. Once Daria exhibited the fact that she was going to be a heel, one of the first things she did was make another big introduction. So we get 2 additions to the Knockouts division, but she announced and brought out Elena Black for her official TNA debut. Now, Elena had done some work in the crossover between NXT and TNA when she was an NXT talent. She was working in NXT as Cora Jade. That's where most of you may know her if you are familiar with Elena Black. She left the business after a couple of appearances post WWE. I thought that was kind of I hated that. I was happy that she was pursuing things that maybe were of more interest to her, but I thought she was very talented, showed a lot of promise, and hated to think that what we got in NXT was going to be the totality of her wrestling career. So getting a second chance here in TNA, I think, is good for that brand with someone who's still young with a lot of potential, and maybe she'll blossom and grow there. Might end up right back on WWE television anyway, considering the relationship that they have with the NXT brand. So I think that's a very good signing and a good newsworthy introduction to have on your debut episode. This is where we get to match number 2. And if it feels like it took me a while to get to match number 2, it's because it took TNA a while to get to match number 2. We were 50 minutes in the broadcast before that match started. This match was featuring the women's division, where the Inspiration were defending the women's tag team titles versus the Elegance brand. The Inspiration were known as the Iconics when they were in WWE, and I think that they featuring them, familiar faces, against the Elegance brand, who are really a very, I think, promising faction, up-and-coming faction, someone that if you're new to TNA, you need to know. So featuring them in a title match and then doing the title switch, this was a good move. It was also I think, from everything that I have heard, that it is maybe a swan song for the Inspiration. So they are leaving TNA reportedly. If so, it was probably a good use of them to get them on television where fans who might recognize who they are, who might attach some importance to them as champions because they have a name in this business, it immediately shows that the Elegance brand being elevated by this outgoing team is a team to watch, which I think is the right move. The match itself, barely acceptable. It was hardly anything to it. So you have 2 matches, and it takes you over almost an hour to get to those 2 matches, and neither of them were anything memorable. That part of the broadcast was suboptimal, in my opinion. We go to more promos at this point. You get the current knockout champs, the current knockout champion, Lei Ying Lee, who in WWE you might remember as Xia Li. She came to the ring to present an open challenge. And this is when we see our first NXT talents, that being Sol Ruca and Zarya, who interrupted to weigh in on the open challenge that was being presented for the Knockouts Championship. Probably smart to have NXT talent show up on the AMC debut, just to establish to fans that if you like WWE, if you like NXT, there's a very good chance that you could see crossovers if you're watching every week not just on Tuesday nights, but now also on Thursday nights. We can do a little bit of promotion back and forth here because the announcers did talk about upcoming matches on NXT on Tuesday, and I imagine the NXT commentators will, in kind, do the same type of promotion for Thursday night Impact when those crossovers do occur. I'm also happy that Zarya, who tends to play second fiddle to Sol Ruka, and there's some good reason for that. Sol Ruka is amazing. But because of that, Zarya, who has a lot of potential herself, sometimes gets overlooked. So the fact that the challenge here is going to go to Zarya challenging for the Impact Knockouts Championship, I think, is a positive development and is good for Zarya's development, quite honestly, as Sol Ruka doesn't seem to have any barriers to her ascent. And I think that more development from Zarya would be nice to see at this stage. Obviously, Lee is going to present a good opponent for her also. Xia Li, the character in WWE, never really got off the ground. She's obviously risen to the top of the ranks in TNA. This would be a good showcase for both women. And I also think a pretty good segment overall. Unfortunately, it was then followed by yet another talking segment. So these start to get a little bit too much, too repetitive, not broken up enough. We hear from the system, and if it's seeming like a very familiar story here, I will keep repeating it, that they put out folks that they know that the wrestling fans will recognize. A lot of familiar faces are in the system in this faction. The former Kurt Hawkins, for example, who is now Brian Myers. Moose, who is kind of an OG TNA guy. If you were following TNA back during the last era that they had a large cable presence, you will remember Moose. Eddie Edwards was a star in Ring of Honor and has been with TNA for a very long time now as well. So more hardcore fans are familiar with him, whether or not they've been watching TNA or not, as well as his wife, Alicia. And then we also had as part of the system the former Fandango, now known as JDC, ahead of what was his final match last night at Genesis. So we had a talking segment with that crew that didn't really provide much other than promotion for their pay-per-view last night. That was followed by yet more talking. The current TNA president, Carlos Silva, introduced the former TNA president, someone who was probably president the last time most people were last watching TNA, and that was Dixie Carter, who was at the time a very divisive figure in pro wrestling because of how often she was featured on the broadcast. To wit, what was supposed to be set up as a heartwarming moment of Dixie Carter making a surprise return to wish TNA well in their new endeavor, she was booed. They booed her out of the building. Kind of felt sorry for her, but what do you expect? It's live TV. She was divisive during the era that she was on television regularly, so it should probably have come as no surprise to current TNA management that this was a possibility. At least she no-sold it and was a good sport about it. At this point, Bubba Ray, known as Bully Ray in TNA, came out, again, another legendary face to establish the importance of this brand. But he came out to help call the main event, which was the world title match between the former champion, Santana, who most recently, to the casual fan, would be someone they would remember from AEW, against Frankie Kazarian, another former AEW talent, but really here's another man who built his legacy in TNA. And to have him as your world champion in this match as an OG TNA guy really drew the line between the TNA of the past and the TNA of present. I thought it was a nice bit of history that he was able to make, being an original TNA talent, that he gets to appear in the very first main event that occurred on AMC. This match, though, did not start until about 20 minutes before the end of the entire broadcast. So you knew it was going to be limited in how long it can go. The crowd was very hyped for it. It was a tightly contested match, had a lot of high points. I will have to be honest in my review to say that it unfortunately got sloppy at the end. It was good overall. I do feel like it was a solid match that would have been much better had it not been for the unfortunate botches either by the wrestlers or maybe even with the ref count. It just got screwy at the end, which is just incredibly unfortunate to happen to your first main event and world title match, mind you, on your debut episode. The headline here, though, is that of the three matches, it was by far the best of the three. And we saw a world title change. So they made sure that the main event of their very first show was noteworthy. Santana is your new TNA World Champion, the right choice to hold that title once again, going into this new era as a younger talent that some fans will recognize. Definitely makes a stronger choice than Kazarian. No offense to Kaz. Overall, it ended the show on a positive note. So what is the overall verdict? What did you all think? To me, a lot of this show ended up being about introducing the product to lapsed TNA fans or maybe first-time TNA fans. They threw a lot of faces out there, as one would imagine that they would, to show that not only do we have a good wrestling product, we have wrestlers you know and remember and maybe liked under their prior personalities and characters. I don't blame them for making sure they didn't just throw out completely new talent and homegrown talent to a broader audience. Maybe, though, they went a little too hard on making sure that every face that they had that once worked in WWE or AEW was on screen. And maybe they didn't give those talent enough time or enough to do. And I'm looking really critically at this juncture of, you had AJ Styles. You really should have done more when you get a big name like AJ Styles. You could have cut back on a few of the other introductions, saved them and rolled them out over future weeks. You had AJ, give him more time, give him more substance and things to do. But when you consider that they were introducing new talent, new faces, old talent with new names, promoting the Genesis pay-per-view, over and over, the announcers kept reminding you, this is the most important night in the history of in TNA. Fair. But that means they were promoting last night's show while the last night's show was going on, while getting ready for a pay-per-view, while reintroducing themselves to the world. That's a lot, and it's a lot of talking. So if you take Total Nonstop Action by its title and realize you only had 3 matches, it's a whole lot of talking and a whole little bit of action, and the action that was there truly wasn't all that great. So to me, they landed at about a C+. Yes, they made it noteworthy by having 2 of those 3 matches ended in title changes. Only one of those 3 matches, though, really gave a hint as to what the TNA roster is capable of. And as I say by hint is the fact that even though I mentioned I have not been a regular viewer in a decade, I've caught the occasional show. So I have seen TNA, the most modern version of TNA. This current roster I have seen put on better shows than they put on for their very first episode on this new platform, which it would have been nice had they been able to dial one of those up. It doesn't always work. It's not in the cards. Was there enough to bring fans back for week 2? I would hope so and would think so. And if you don't think so, I would hope that you have enough grace to at least extend a week or 2 more for them to work out the bugs and to have a few better shows, because I do believe better shows are in their future than the one they presented this past Thursday. Not bad, but far from perfect. Overall, I say it's somewhere in the middle. Probably didn't turn off too many fans who were excited about it. Probably didn't earn them too many fans who were skeptical about it. We will see where it goes from here. It will be interesting to see what kind of ratings they did. I know when we did our award show a few weeks back, my bold prediction for 2026 was by the end of the year that TNA was going to keep riding their momentum that they've had the last year and a half, 2 years, and we're going to ride this new contract and exposure and their WWE tie-in to a ratings victory by the end of 2026 over AEW. After what I saw this past week, I think that my bold prediction is even bolder now because I think they may have a harder time getting there unless they start making some improvements. I think they will. Let's see what they do moving forward. Obviously, we're going to keep following the story as it progresses. What did you think? What grade would you give it? What did you like? What did you hate? Let us know in the comments. We will reply to everyone. And with that, we're going to hit our big finish. We're going to start with the botch of the week. And no, I'm not going to talk about the actual in-ring botch that put a spoil on what was otherwise a really good world title match on Thursday Night Impact. That could happen to anyone. Unfortunately, botches on live television in the ring, they'll occur in WWE, AEW. They can't be helped. It's just unfortunate it would happen in your biggest match on one of your biggest nights. The match itself, still great. I'm going to go instead for a botch that they very much had control over, and that is TNA showing the empty arena seats, as I mentioned earlier. Why, oh, why would you put a focus on an arena that was obviously completely devoid of fans? That was a choice. You could have put those folks anywhere. You could have put the people on screen in front of the hard camera where they had fans behind them. You could have used them in backstage segments where they would have a screen behind them or walls behind them. You did not have to show all of the empty seats and that you were trying some trickery earlier on by making it look like a sold-out crowd. There was good energy in the building. It was a good-sized crowd, especially for TNA. And they are getting decent-sized crowds, part of what helped them get this new media rights deal and this opportunity. But Bush League to show the fact that, oh, yeah, it's a bit of smoke and mirrors. Let's keep that just on the production side and in the know for those who are there in the arena. You don't need to show the home audience. So that was my botch, one that was easily avoidable. And that takes us to performance of the week. I'm going to go broad here, and I'm going to say TNA is my performer of the week. Would it have been nice to see them hit a home run on their first night on AMC? Absolutely. You do, after all, only get one chance to make that first impression. But they didn't strike out. It wasn't the strongest of shows, but still, I would be remiss to not give TNA credit for just getting to this moment and just for the accomplishment itself of airing on AMC this week and airing on AMC on all future Thursday nights as well. Let's see where they build from here. But absolutely, I'm giving the TNA staff, the TNA wrestlers, the TNA behind the scenes team, my performer of the week for putting all kinds of effort into this night. Just because everything didn't pan out the way that one would hope does not discount the fact that this was a milestone week for the company, and they should be recognized for that fact. That's why they get my performer of the week. Match of the week. If I'm going to go and be honest and just say based on in-ring work rate and the excitement of the match, it wouldn't be anything from TNA Impact on Thursday night. It would have to be, for me, the best match of the entire week was probably that match that was Javon Evans's Raw singles match debut against Bravo. I think it was an amazing introduction by Javon, who is definitely the future of WWE, in my opinion, a talent to watch. But that's going just on work rate and overall match quality. If I'm just going for sentimentality and historical importance, which I am going to do here, I'm going to go ahead and give my match of the week to Santana winning the world title from TNA, OG himself, Kazarian. That's got to be my pick just for the historical purpose behind it. It was, again, if not for that botch or the sloppiness at the end, I think that we all would be talking a whole lot more about how good this match was. It was good up until those last final minutes. It would be a slam dunk choice for my match of the week had it not been for those last couple of unfortunate minutes that ended it a little sloppily. But it's still history to be the very first main event on AMC, and then to pull off a title switch in that is something that fans will remember long after they remember what happened at the very end and maybe how it got a bit convoluted. So, for those reasons alone, if I was to recommend to you one match that for historical purposes you should go and make sure you watch, the emotion, the history, the title switch to Santana, that would be the one I would recommend to all you wrestling fans. And with that, we've come to the end of our broadcast. You can see scrolling below what we have upcoming, and we hope that you join us next week. Again, Doug will be back with us as we get ready to talk about Royal Rumble. Are you ready for the Rumble? Kind of not, honestly. It seems like it's a little soon for me, and maybe it has a lot to do with the fact of where this year's Royal Rumble is taking place. That is something that is obviously going to be a big part of the conversation when we preview Royal Rumble in our next broadcast, and we talk about the controversial decision to have these types of major pay-per-view events in the country of Saudi Arabia. So join us either on Facebook or our YouTube channels for our next broadcast, as well as future broadcasts. Like, subscribe, comment. We appreciate you. However you watch us, thank you for doing so. And until we see you again, it's Kevin, and thank you for tuning in to the Two Bros Wrestling Show. As Doug would say, in his honor, I will repeat it. Go watch some wrestling, everybody. See you next time.